Can anybody hear me?
We can
Yes, we
hear you.
can.
Okay, great, thanks.
before we start.
Hi, Wendy.
Is there any way to make my photo on that screen smaller? Because that is huge.
It's really big on the big screen. If I leave my mic on, it should. Oh, maybe not.
No.
Not till she starts.
She has to be.
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning and welcome to this special council meeting, Tuesday, July 30th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Are there any announcements, acknowledgements, or recognitions? I do have a proclamation, Emancipation Day. Whereas August 1st is Emancipation Day, commemorating the anniversary date of 1834, when the British Parliament abolished slavery across its empire, freeing about 800,000 enslaved people of African descent throughout the British colonies. Whereas we must acknowledge that slavery was part of our province and country's horrific past, and this history must be shared in our efforts to work together to address anti-Black racism and all forms of racism, so all Nova Scotians can prosper, reach their full potential, and live as equal citizens. Therefore, on behalf of the municipality of the District of Lunenburg, I hereby proclaim August 1st to be Emancipation Day. I also would like to congratulate the South Shore Exhibition, all the staff, volunteers, and exhibitors, and everyone else, those that came out to the exhibition for another successful event. Anyone that was there on Saturday night and witnessed the amount of people that was there for the concert, it was definitely overwhelming to see that type of crowd come out. But I think the perfect weather and everything else definitely helped. So hats off, I guess, to the exhibition for another successful event. Is there anyone here for public input? Anyone here for public input? Okay, so we have 15 minutes allocated for public input. If we have two people, that's 7.5 minutes each. So if you would like to start, and then we can, the balance, I'm not sure if you have more than 7.5 minutes, but I don't want to cut anybody off if I don't have to. So whoever would like to go first, please come to the mic, state your name and the community that you live in.
I'm told I need to adjust the desk here. So
Yes, that
good.
would help you.
Is that a good height for audio?
You're
Good morning, Mayor Bolivar-Getson, members of council and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. My name's Colin Mann, longtime resident of Second Peninsula. In the fall of 2022, a group of concerned residents of Modal, many of whom are residents of Second Peninsula and the surrounds, approached staff and council with concerns about a proposal for development on Second Peninsula. The developer was using the bare land condominium structure to, in our opinion, advance a development of inappropriate density for this location, with little to no oversight or scrutiny. Our position, supported by residents representing over 90% of the lands of Second Peninsula, was that the proposed development is of a density that is likely to irreversibly damage the environment, character, and safety of the neighborhood of Second Peninsula. Our concerns were both for the effects of this development and the potential for similar future developments in the municipality where the Bearland condominium structure could be used to advance developments of inappropriate density for the location with no oversight. We presented a petition signed by hundreds of your constituents. 120 people went further and offered specific and heartfelt comments of support for these concerns, and these were presented to you. To be clear, our concerns have never been simply anti-development and are in no way against appropriate responses to a housing crisis. Indeed, appropriate, sustainable development is necessary for a vital and thriving community. However, it needs to be the right development in the right place, sensitive to environmental, cultural, and safety concerns of each location. The planned development on Second Peninsula is, simply put, inappropriate for the location, for which many reasons were outlined in the petition that was presented to Council and staff at that time. Council and staff of Modal appeared to hear our concerns and appreciate the urgency of the situation. In fact, 1 year ago, Council was so concerned that you sent a letter to the Premier and Minister asking that immediate action be taken by the province with a moratorium on Bearland condominium approvals by the condo registrar until regulation could be put in place. The province declined to act. Since that time, concerned residents of Modal have continued to work with Council and staff through the public consultation process to encourage development of an appropriate land use bylaw, which would allow appropriate oversight and regulation of cluster developments. While this process has been slower than we would have preferred, it was heartening that there would be some pathway for reasonable oversight of proposed development to ensure that developments are aligned with Council's stated goals of protecting natural environment, fostering growth centres, preserving distinct communities, and encouraging climate change-sensitive development. However, the current proposed land use bylaw includes a clause to grandfather or deem non-conforming any developments that might be registered in the next 17 months. This is contrary to your stated goals and severely undermines any actual value of the land use bylaw. With this clause, the very residents of Modal who initially brought these concerns forward and led to the land use bylaw change are being abandoned by Council. The unique community and environment that is the municipality of the District of Lunenburg is being sacrificed to the greed of a few developers. The myriad of safety and environmental concerns raised by inappropriate cluster developments with inappropriate density are being ignored. In its current form, the proposed regulation would do absolutely nothing to provide any oversight on Bearland condos registered in the next 17 months, and the permanent damage and harm to the community will be irreversible. To be clear, though I'm a Second Peninsula resident and have acted in concert with many residents of Second Peninsula in expressing our worries, no action you take today will have any influence on the development on Second Peninsula. The delays and missteps made in implementing regulation means the developer has simply gone ahead and registered all phases of the condominium. Ironically, those are being registered as we speak this very day at the land registry. It's profoundly disappointing to those of us that are concerned for the safety of the land, the environment, the culture, and the people of our municipality. It is for the rest of Modal that I worry today. If you leave the grandfathering clause and timeline in the regulation, there will be a rush to new development and registration under the Bearland condominium structure before the deadline. You are in fact inviting developers who have unscrupulous motives to act quickly. Let me paint you a possible image of a council meeting 2 years from now. Council will be dealing with the consequences of high-density Bearland condo developments in many areas of Modal. There'll be problems in sensitive ecological areas and immediate coastal areas like Masons Beach. High-density developments subject to public safety wildfire evacuation concerns on places like Second Peninsula, with only one road to escape from a peninsula that is 8 kilometers long. High-density developments that outstrip the available aquifers in the area, and high-density developments with sewer systems that, while individually approved, as a whole, overload the drainage into sensitive low-flow waterways. Those consequences could not be undone at that stage. Council has an option today, though. You can choose to be true to your stated value, vision, and mission. Council can remove the grandfather or non-conforming clause from the regulation. This would simply mean that as of today, without delay, there would be reasonable scrutiny applied to all future cluster developments in modal. This is consistent with your action around coastal protection. The above scenarios would not happen, as those potential problems would be anticipated and prevented with appropriate planning. To be clear, this is not preventing development or legislating against development. It's merely ensuring that appropriate oversight is applied and Council and Modal have some control over development that may be inappropriate for environmental, cultural, or safety reasons. Leaving the grandfather clause and timeline in place would mean that the process and all the public consultation was a sham and was done for show only. The only possible reason to leave in the non-conforming clause and timeline would be to placate unscrupulous developers who have plans that would not stand up to reasonable scrutiny. You have agreed that reasonable regulation is needed. There is simply no reason to delay it 17 months. We ask that Council not abandon the residents and environments of Modal to inappropriate development. Don't ignore the many voices of your constituents that you've heard. There are many places in Modal that are the thriving communities with unique cultural identities that you name in your vision statement. The changes and damage that will result to the areas of Modal with unique geographic, environmental, and cultural characteristics, if grandfathering is left in, are significant and irreversible. Instead, I challenge you today to live up to the mission of being sustainable community builders, demonstrate that you are collaborative engagers, and finally, be true to your stated value, that you act with integrity, that you're accountable, and strive to provide exceptional leadership within a municipality. You have that opportunity and that responsibility today. Be bold in your actions. Pass first reading of the land use bylaw regarding cluster developments without the non-conforming clause. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And our next speaker. And again, if you could state your name and the community that you live in.
So I'll just get down so you can see me here. There. My name's David Jarvis. I live in Lunenburg on Second Peninsula, where this development is directly affecting me. But aside from that, my wife and I, Karen, we run an organisation called We Feed Lunenburg. This aims to build a self-sufficient community where the community comes together and looks after itself. It's based on the subsistence farming method that I learned from living in Africa, where you look after yourself first, then your family, then your neighbours, and then your community. So I'm here really to listen to what you have to say about the food hub and how it affects us. As running a food pantry in Lunenburg, I see every day, firsthand, just how terrible the situation is in this area. Now, excuse me if I get emotional, but I see young families with children, I see seniors, which appalls me, using that pantry every day. Now, we've been growing fruit and vegetables in our garden for 4 years to try and supply the community. I have a group of 540 people who help me do this. I supplied 400 transplants to people to grow their own food and give their excess to those in need. So it's hugely important to me that we build this community. I'm really interested in your food hub bit because Food Banks Canada produced this really beautiful coloured standards of excellence. Now in there it states that any food from community gardens or from own people's gardens is high risk and should not be accepted. So basically if you sneak out in the night and put a zucchini on somebody's doorstep, you are at high risk of killing them. I don't understand why, and it appalls me. So that's why I'm here. I just want to hear what you have to say about food hubs and to really try and make you aware of the desperate situation there is at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move down to the approval of the agenda or any changes, additions. Councillor Haysom.
Thank you so much. I'd like to add an agenda item under Councillors' matters regarding Rissers Beach.
So in order to do that, we need to have a motion to do that. and we need 2/3 in favor.
So I will move to add that to the agenda.
So moved by Councillor Haysom, seconded by Councillor Hubley. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Deputy Mayor Oikle?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. So would someone move the approval of the agenda with the added item? Moved by Councillor DeLong, seconded by Councillor Moore. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. And we do have regrets from Councillor Greek today. Okay, we will move down to awarding of tenders, award of RFP number 2024-01-402, Food Hub Feasibility Study. And we have Mark Strickland. Official title?
Can everybody hear me?
Economic Development Officer. Go ahead.
I've been called worse. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here today for the request for decision of the District of Lunenburg Food Feasibility Study.
Okay, I'm not hearing you. So if you can come a little
down.
closer to the mic.
Okay, here, I'll move over. How's that? Can you hear me now?
All right.
So I'm here today for the request of decision for the the District of Lunenburg Food Hub Feasibility Study, RFP number 24-01-402. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'll member on and you'll say, what is he talking about? So what we've done is we've seen over the last couple of years, there's been some interest in a food hub within the municipality. 2 years ago of agricultural days, we've had farmers approach us about some interest in it. And our food security project, with our interviews with the agricultural community, a significant number asked maybe that we could explore that a little bit further and see what the feasibility could be for a food hub here in the South Shore. The South Shore is one of the only areas here in the province that doesn't have a food hub. There's a food hub in the valley, there's one in Halifax, one in Cape Breton, some smaller areas throughout the province, there's small food hubs. So we issued sorry.
Councillor Vino?
I'm just wondering if we could turn the mic up a little louder. I'm just hearing some struggling from the audience.
That's what I'm doing now.
Okay. Sorry, Mark, just didn't want you to have to
That's
repeat
all right.
everything.
Just tell me when I can go.
I think the mic is
I've
lower
never
than it
been told,
normally.
I should be louder, so I'm not used to that.
Can you hold on?
Technical difficulties.
All right, go ahead.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? We're good?
Is that better back there?
Okay. So we issued an RFP for the feasibility of the food hub on May the 14th of this year, and it closed June 27th. So we left it 6 weeks for potential proponents to evaluate and see if they wanted to apply to have a feasibility, to apply to the feasibility study of the food hub. We had 6 proposals. 5 of them were located in the province of Nova Scotia, and 1 was from Prince Edward Island. All of the proposals were on or below budget at $60,000, and the spread, they were relatively close for pricing. The spread was $7,500 from lowest to highest bid. The evaluation committee scored all proposals and selected Third Sector Enhancement Limited as the top proposal, a score of 87.75. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Although it had the high score of $60,000 in price, the technical score was 79 with a comprehensive work and engagement plan. Third Sector Enhancement demonstrated significant and relevant work experience. So some of their highlights why we decided this are, they have 40 years experience in the agriculture and food industry. They have experience with the HRM Food Hub, Station Food Hub, Happy Valley Goose Bay, and the West Hants exhibition site, which included a food hub, farmers market, food processing operation. They had significant,
Councillor Moore?
The third sector, are they one of the ones from Nova Scotia or?
Yes, they're
PEI?
from Nova Scotia.
Thank you.
Okay,
So, no other questions?
continue.
Okay, thank you. So they have experience in supply chain. They have CFIA experience, which is the only one that had CFIA experience, and it's really essential to have that if you're trying to put food into institutions. They have experience in distribution ecosystems in Atlantic Canada. And they have experience here with our local business community. One of their members had a consulting business here in Bridgewater, and we're consulting businesses. And one of their other members led the South Shore Agri-Innovation Park project here. They also have experience in the business case planning and market research in some of the local farms in the district. So although the company's not a local company, they have experience working with our local businesses and farms. So we thought that was quite important. So when you look at their work plan, they were looking to do a SWOT analysis, which is fairly standard. But they were also looking at doing a pest analysis, and that's not as common. So basically, a pest analysis is a political, economic, social, and technological analysis. This type of analysis gauges external factors that could impact the profitability of a company. So and one of the other important things is there has to be a lot of community engagement with this. We need to go out to the community and look at all the different players and make sure, we get feedback on what this may look like. So they had a robust community engagement plan with one of their team members periodically teaching at Acadia University at the Community Development Program and extensive community development experience throughout the Annapolis Valley. So you as a council, your alternatives are, you could decide not to accept the recommendation, select another candidate, choose not to proceed with the project. But in conclusion, the evaluation team is recommended that RFP 240142 to be awarded to Third Sector Enhancement Limited, who received the highest technical score for the proposal and the highest overall score to complete the feasibility study and to be completed by the end of February 2025.
Councillor DeLong.
Thank you. That sounds very impressive. During their past analysis, the political climate you mentioned, does that mean that they'll present to us?
Yes, they will. Part of their
Okay.
engagement will become to you guys in 2 sessions.
Okay, that's
There'll be
good.
an intern session, and then it'll be a final report come to you guys.
Okay. Given what we heard this morning about food controls and their experience with the CFIA, I think that that's going to be an important discussion.
Very important. They were the only one that, mentioned that within all the proposals.
Okay.
We thought that was really, again, if there seems to be a gap getting local food into institutions, and of
Yeah.
course you have to go through that. The Department of Agriculture now has a new procurement team, so to put into these types of things. But again, they have experience, they can guide this hub to do the proper things.
And I remember volunteering for the food bank in Halifax at one point, and we couldn't take farmers' food, and I thought that was a very strange, perplexing problem. Thank you.
Councillor Stanton.
Thank you. I have 2 questions for Mark, if I might. The first one is, will Third Sector be picking a location for this food bank?
They're going to be looking at
Locations?
several locations, potential locations for the area.
And will they be considering community gardens as part of the survey?
That's a good question. We can ask them that. It wasn't in the RFP, but
Okay.
again, that could be an important factor, and it's great that you let us know, and we'll have a conversation with them if they're selected.
Thank you.
Councillor Vino.
Thank you. When I was looking into the proponents that were listed here, I had St. Margaret's Bay being home to Third Sector and looking up all the different ones, I could not find MPS. Every search for MPS led me to members of parliament, and I don't think they were the bidders. So can you confirm where MPS is or what it is?
I think they're I don't have it in front of me. I think they're maybe one of the ones that were out of Prince Edward Island. But I don't have it right in front of me.
Okay.
They were all in Nova Scotia besides one of them, and if I could say it.
Okay.
I apologize, I don't have it with me, because I would come in with a big file. But
Councillor Haysom.
Thank you. My question was asked.
Deputy Mayor Royko.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering, when you say the South Shore, will they be looking at also Queens County and Shelburne? Like, will their search be going down as far as there, or are they just going to be looking within Lunenburg County?
it will be the entire South Shore, but the majority of the area will be within this area, because we have the density. farms
can't
here.
hear you.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Speak and
It,
repeat
it
into
will
the
be
microphone.
the, part of the South Shore, the entire South Shore, but the majority of their focus will be within the district of Lunenburg, because we have the most farms and the most, it's centralized.
Right, right. But it is a business, correct? Like the hub is a business for farmers to bring their product and then hopefully distribute it from there to local, like institutions, as you've mentioned, and restaurants, correct?
It could be, yes. What they'll do is if part of that feasibility study will show what the model should be and what the market is in this area. So it could be an aggregation point, it could be value added, it could be, distribution to retail, to institutions, to restaurants. They'll be all part of that engagement. And, at the end of the day, they'll come back to us and say, here's the perfect model, or not the perfect model, the best model for the South Shore, what it may look like to be successful.
Okay, and if I may, Your Honor, I have a supplemental question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And what will the end result be for council? What are we to do with this information? Is it for council to start if it's a good idea to do the community hub? Or will we be looking for others, private sector, to be doing it? Like, what is the end result of this?
The end result would be, part of the feasibility study will come back with a proposed management model, an ownership model, to come back to council, so they're informed on that. I don't know what that will look like until the feasibility study's done. It may say, it should be a third party. It should be a co-op. It should be, I don't anticipate us as a municipal unit running it. But again, that's part of the reason for the feasibility study. We're trying to understand what that operational model and management model will look like.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Haysom.
Thank you. I do understand that the concept behind the food hub is to support our local producers, and of course that's very important, but I wonder if there's also an opportunity for council to encourage direction towards things like food banks and institutions to ensure that we are looking after people that are here, and if that's something that can be accounted for in that feasibility study.
Yeah, yes, it could be.
Okay.
Again, the ultimate goal is to help that small-scale farmer come up with a new sales channel for them, right? And help them grow. At the end of the day, part of our mandate is to help agriculture grow. We've seen gaps within that area. So, again, it's not for me to say, but the study will dictate some of that and what that may look like. They have lots of experience in those areas as well. So
Okay.
again, as we meet and we work through the process, we'll look at all the different elements. to make
Okay, that's wonderful, because obviously, we want to support our local farmers, but of course, we have a wider community that we need to support as well.
Yeah.
And I think of schools, hospitals, but also food banks, like was
Yeah,
mentioned.
and we'll have engagement with them. as
Perfect,
part of
thank you.
the
Thank you so
feasibility
much,
study.
Mark.
Councillor Hobley.
Councillor Haysom asked my question. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Same thing. Thank you, Councillor Haysom, for bringing that forward. Representing a district that has a pantry and a food bank in my area, I see this as a great opportunity to help these smaller organizations generate more food for the people. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mark? Again, we had a couple suggestions there, good suggestions in relation to food banks, community gardens, that would like to see incorporated into.
And we will.
Yeah.
We'll address that.
Okay. I would ask if Councillor Haysom would be prepared to make that motion.
Yes, thank you. To Her Honor Mayor Bolivar Getson and members of council, I move that Municipal Council award the request for proposal 2024-01-402, District of Lunenburg Food Hub Feasibility Study to Third Sector Enhancement Limited for the completion of the Food Hub Feasibility Study in the amount of $60,000 plus HST, and I so move.
Moved by Councillor Haysom, seconded by Councillor Bell. Discussion on the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Question has been called for. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor Oikel?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. We will move down to 5.2, award of tender, reformer center school site assessments. And we have our Director of Engineering, Stephen Pace.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The MODL seeks to move forward with the demolition and the removal, as well as site remediation of the former center school, consolidated school. In order to prepare for this work, environmental studies are required to determine the type and the quantities of contamination and hazardous materials that are present. A Phase 1 environmental site assessment, or called an ESA, was done in 2015, and it recommended a Phase 2 ESA be prepared to move on in the demolition process. So professional fee proposals were requested from 2 firms on MODL's standing offer for engineering, design, and construction oversight services, or our standing offer. We requested proposals from Strum Consulting and EXP Services. Now, each firm was asked to do a proposal for two different services. There's the ESA, the Phase 2 ESA, and that determines the soil and site contamination component of the project. And then there's a hazardous material, or a hazmat screening assessment, and that's for the building. So there's two scopes of work. So we had them priced individually. So the costs for each scope of work from each consulting firm are shown in the council report. The combined based fee estimates for the 2 scopes of work from Strum Consulting were $44,950,000, and from EXP was $54,600. So we add a 15% contingency, and net HST brings the Strum total to $53,920. So being lower than EXP on both scopes of work, Strum Consulting is the recommended choice for the project. Just a little bit of background, the hazmat screening survey, when that's conducted for the building, will determine a Class D estimate for that, and that will be included in the upcoming capital budgeting process. So by the end of that that scope of work, we'll have enough rough idea of the cost to take down the building. And the Phase 2 ESA may or may not necessarily generate a Class D estimate. Depending on the findings of the Phase 2 ESA, a Phase 3 ESA may be required. And this will provide a Class D estimate for capital budgeting purposes. So the intent of this project is also to seek Nova Scotia Environment regulatory closure for the site. A decision will be required to determine the level of site remediation, that is in the soil contamination, whether we want to achieve Tier 1 or Tier 2. Tier 1 provides the ability to provide potable water for the site. It's a higher level of cleanliness, if you like, of the soil. Tier 2 leaves contaminants in the ground, provided they do not permeate to other areas. So they're in a designated area. In the case of Riverport School, Council at the time decided on a Tier 1. So that was achieved, but it was an extra cost and did take extra time. So that'll be a decision Council will have to make down the road. The purpose of having these studies conducted now is to determine the extent of work, Class D cost estimates, and then to have shelf ready in order to apply for funding support. In the case of Riverport School, we achieved 73.3 funding contributions, which offset MODL's costs significantly. There's no guarantee we'll receive any funding in time for demolition and site remediation work to proceed next year, depending on when the grant opportunities arrived. It's important to have it shelf ready, as we did with Riverport School. Those studies were done ahead of time. So it's important to note that once the ESAs are filed with Environment, it does start a time clock to complete the work. And they have to be refiled. An ESA has to be filed with Environment once completed. So budget implications, the 24-25 approved capital budget includes $100,000 for environmental site assessment and building demolition preparation work. So Strum's consulting professional estimate of $53,920, including 15% contingency and net HST for the Phase 2 ESA and hazmat screening assessment is within the approved budget. As a work plan, the Phase 2, both of the scopes of work should be completed within 12 weeks upon award. The recommendations for council to authorize staff to award the Phase 2 Environmental Site Assessment, or ESA, and Hazardous Material, hazmat screening assessment for the former Centers Consolidated School and Sewage Treatment Plant to Strum Consulting Limited in the amount of $53,920, including a 15% contingency in HST.
Thank you. Any questions in relation to that? Councillor Vino?
Thank you, and thank you, Stephen, for outlining that. This is something that I definitely heard on the doorsteps when campaigning in 2020. Two of the most common words were eyesore and dangerous, and do something with it. I think we've explored all avenues to do something with the building, and have always come up not able to fulfill those obligations or commitments because it can't be done. So I'm happy to, it is time. It's time for it to come down. My one request is to whichever firm is awarded here today, that the least amount of disruption goes to the users of the soccer field. It's a very active field, and parking moves in front of the school, even on a practice night. So making sure that they can still carry on their season while being able to move forward with this is really important to the users as well.
Councillor Staton?
Thank you. Just a quick question for Stephen. Phase 1 of the inspection, or whatever they're going, assessment, will that just take the building to the stripped metal, or will that demolish everything that's there? Because I understand it's a metal building.
This is just a hazmat screening assessment, and it'll identify all the hazardous material in the building. But it will provide us a Class D estimate of what they expect the whole demolition and removal to cost. But this is a consultant report, it's not the contractor.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying whether but the assessment will tell us whether the building will be demolished completely or just the hazard material taken out of it.
Oh, yes, it is a hazmat identification and also cost estimate to take the whole building down.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you. These assessments, they really need to be done. This particular question you're asking today, I would have liked to see this done back in 2015, 2016. And the remove of the building, that should have happened several years ago. But as you know, it's a sticking point with me on how we got saddled with these particular costs when it's not necessarily the case in all municipal units. So anything we can do to alleviate this problem, remove any contaminants, and get rid of that eyesore. Every time I drive by, I hate to admit that we have any ownership in that.
Thank you. And I guess I just want to go back to that statement Councillor Bell made for those that are here and listening. Municipalities had options back in the day as to what they would do when it changed over to consolidation. Schools became the ownership of municipalities at that time. And under that ownership, the council of the day decided that they wanted to be the owners of the building if they were ever deemed surplus. And at that particular point in time, all the schools were new, but they didn't stay new. And usually at the end of the useful life of a school, there goes less and less maintenance into those schools. And it wasn't from lack of trying of many councils to try to repurpose Center School into something that would be a fit for the community. And that was everything from housing to private sector to many different things. But it definitely has reached that stage where the only course of action that should happen here is demolition. And as early as a week or two ago, I actually had an inquiry as to whether they could look at using it for something, but it's definitely not in a condition to be used for anything at this point in time. Part of the service exchange as well means that we will not have to take ownership of any of the schools that become surplus from this time forward. That will be a decision of council to make, not the provincial government saying it's now yours. So that option is definitely there for councils in the future. And the shelf-ready part, very, very important. We never know when there's going to be a program out there, and the Riverport school funding, the only reason we were able to tap into that was because we had that assessment done on Riverport and we were ready. So you need to be ready for the funding. 73% is a lot of money. I believe this is sitting on the books right now at 1 to 2 million, or is it more than that for the demolition on our books?
Right now, we're here, in the capital budget, we put in 2 million, but that's
Yeah.
just a real rough number.
And could be more. So at this time, I would entertain a motion, and I would ask Councillor Vino if she'd be prepared to move that motion.
Yes, certainly. To our honor, Mayor Bolivar Getson and members of council, I move that Municipal Council award the Phase 2 Environmental Site Assessment and Hazardous Material Screening Assessment tender for the former Center Consolidated School and Sewage Treatment Plant to Strum Consulting Limited in the amount of $53,920, including a 15% contingency and net HST. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Vino, seconded by Councillor Wynot. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Haysom.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. You said that there is a time frame with the ESA, so we want to be shovel ready. How long does that last for? Before we would need to do something again? Did you say that?
I'm not understanding.
You
The
said
study itself,
the
how
study
long would it
itself.
be valid?
Oh, the study is valid for.
Yes.
It's.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you
yeah.
said that there was a time frame on it
The
before. we
12-week
have to-
is for them to construct, or to finish the work, correct?
That's
Yes.
right. And once they finish it, it's registered with Department of Environment, and then they start like a time clock. It goes on their file, and then they start to sort of get after you to get it done within a certain time frame.
And what is that time frame?
I think it's like a couple of years.
Okay.
And we, in the case of Riverport School, we had it shelf ready, and we kept every year having to reapply, having our site professional reapply and extend that for a period of time. So there's some flexibility there,
Okay.
but there is an accountability to get it addressed
Okay.
within a reasonable time frame.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further questions on the motion? If not, all those in favor? Deputy Mayor Oikel?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. We will move down to 6.1.1 Cluster Development Regulations. And we have Reed and Jacob.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Jacob is going to give us a brief overview of the draft regulations, which you have in order to possibly do first reading with those today. But before he gets started, I just wanted to just quickly outline what your options are as a council in terms of decisions that you can or you can make this morning or not. Obviously, first reading is an option. So the previous motion that was passed by council was to kind of redraft the regulations based on the discussion at that time in order for council to be able to conduct first reading. So what's been prepared to you is a package of material that contains correspondence, the draft regulations in the form of amendments to our new municipal-wide land use bylaw, as well as some amendments to our municipal planning strategy. And those were a changed version from what was brought forward during the previous couple of months ago when it was intended for first reading as well. So that's an option. Council can pass first reading today, which would then, and the report suggests that there would be kind of similar to the coastal project, an information session to outline for the community what the implications of the new regulations are. And then another piece that would be required, of course, is a second reading and an official public hearing, and that could occur in September. So those are the kind of timeframes that have been suggested as if council wanted to do first reading today. Another option is that council may decide that they don't want to act on this today and to defer it into the future, or after the election, a new council may determine that they want to pick this up at that time. Council can also not pass a motion today on this at all, in which we would not take any further action on this. Of course, as you know, MODL 2040 is our larger land use planning project. A lot of the kind of aspects of this, such as, what are the conditions and criteria of a development agreement, that type of stuff will be brought forward as part of MODL 2040, because development agreements are a tool that's a possible, a tool that you can use in a lot of different situations. So you'll see a lot of that similar types of stuff that we'll be bringing forward as part of that project, but we're not dealing with that really until kind of doing a lot more work with council and the public kind of once the new council is in place. So just wanted to give you an overview of, those are in terms of what council wants to do in terms of decision. Those are some options that you can look at this morning. Otherwise, I can turn it over to Jacob to just give a high-level overview of what the regulations are. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Reid, and good morning to everybody in attendance, both in person and online. As Reid mentioned, I'm going to walk you through the cluster development regulations that were drafted that come in the form of a amended land use bylaw and municipal planning strategy. So we'll just move ahead here just to give another quick overview of what it is. Cluster development is a type of residential development where you have several detached and or multiple dwelling units that are on the same property. The standards of the subdivision bylaw do not currently apply to these developments, and this had raised concerns over things like substandard roads, environmental impact, as well as the local capacity for waste and water on the site. Public engagement for this process began in July of 2023. It was supported by the Planning Advisory Committee in October and was set to go before council for first reading in February. But it was put on hold while council took time to consider new public input that had been given just before that time. And during that period, staff reworked the regulations to conform with the requirements of the Municipal Government Act and presented that in the form of an options report, which was passed by council with direction to proceed to first reading right at that star here. A quick overview of the regulations themselves. They apply to cluster developments that are of 6 or more units over 2 or more structures in any unserviced lot. So as long as you have one lot, you've got multiple units over 2 structures, it becomes defined as a cluster development, and these would be approved by the development agreement process. For ongoing Bearland condominium projects, a window has been provided in these regulations for these developments to become legally non-conforming by registering their condominium units by December 31st, 2025. And just to specify that this would only apply to a Bearland condominium. If you're creating something not through a condominium structure that still conforms with the description of the cluster development rules, then it would not apply.
Councillor Haysom?
Thank you so much. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on the non-conforming provision for condominium registration being extended to December 31st, 2025?
Yeah, for sure. Previously, council had decided on a date on which to have the registration timeline be set, and that date was moved forward essentially to the time, like it's the same period of time for development.
Between first reading and...
Yes, exactly. Thanks. Does that answer your question?
No. I guess, given some of the issues that have been raised by members of the public, I'm wondering if we could have a recap of why we are offering a 17-month period between first reading for condominiums to be registered. Thanks.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. So there was a discussion opportunity for council to make it, not a decision at that time, but provide direction on what they wanted to do around these kind of in-progress developments that are out there. There's more than one, there are several that we're aware of. And so we brought in some legal advice as well as provided some options for council to consider. One of those options is that there's no additional time frame. So council does not have to push that date forward. They could simply remove that clause. And as of the notice of passing of first reading, if that were today, there was a notice published on our website tomorrow, that would be the in effect time frame. And so that's certainly an option. But kind of reflecting back on that previous discussion that council had, it was the wish of council to provide a window to give what we were discussing as a reasonable time frame for those people who were partway through the process of development of a condominium to complete that. The intention of the time frame was not to allow new people to come in and get a whole project going, but was to recognize that there was a level of investment that people had already put into a project, that those do take a fair amount of time and money to get to that registration point. And so that was the decision or the direction that council provided at that time.
Supplementary?
Thanks so much. So I guess the concern that we're hearing from people is that in that time frame, there's opportunities for new projects to begin and go through that registration process. And what I've understood is that that is quite an onerous process that takes a significant amount of time. So could you speak to that a little bit, please?
I can't say I'm an expert on the condominium registration process, but we are aware that there are certain requirements that proponents have to meet in order to reach the registration phase. Tom may know a little bit more about that process than me, but things like site work and infrastructure that they have to do on the condominium side. We're not involved, we don't know about it sometimes, but they have to do all that work as they prepare for registration. There's a lot of survey work that has to happen to define different boundaries of units. So they need to do all of that work prior to being able to register those units. They need to be able to prove that they have this site with all these different features, describe them appropriately. And so that does take a significant amount of time to do all of that. And so that's kind of, I think, where that time frame is trying to recognize that the registration process just does take some time and effort.
So I guess just to that, and again, that process, there was a lengthy discussion on that by council based on individuals who have already started the process and how long it would take them to finish the process. And this was the timeline that staff had expressed would be needed to finish those in the queue, is my understanding, not for new ones to come in, but for them to finish what they've already started. That was my understanding. And the date that we originally had used was September of 2025, correct?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but it was approximately 18 months.
That was the date, and we have had a however many month lull, but individuals have had that opportunity to continue to work on their proposals as well. So the intent was not for new development to come in, but for those that were already in the queue to be able to finish what they started. They came in under a certain set of rules, and by changing the rules midstream on someone could mean, well, it would mean that they couldn't finish what they started in that manner, but they'd have to come in under a development agreement, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So a
Yes.
new proposal that meets the definition, so the 6 or more would fall under the development agreement process.
Yes. Okay. Further questions? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. So we have heard about the time frame options.
Yeah.
I'd like to direct a question maybe to Mr. McEwen. what is our legal requirements regarding the non-confirming clause and the grandfather clause? When we did coastal regulations, it became effective immediately. With this, we're extending a period of time, which was September, and then we added an additional 3 months. So I am understanding to believe that no one can come in tomorrow and file for a plan and be covered until September or December of '25. But existing projects that were in the mix, we will allow them to proceed. So I just want to make sure I have the understanding that what the cutoff period is and what is our legal requirements as far as provincial legislation.
So thank you for the question. Just stepping back a little bit, one of the requirements under the Condominium Act is we get a form from the developer that goes to our development officer asking to confirm whether or not the phased development condominium is in conformance with municipal land use bylaws or regulations. So in the instance for Second Peninsula, as an example, we received that request for confirmation, and because there was no land use bylaw in place, we confirmed that it met the requirements, because there were none. And based upon that, the developer was able to move forward. We're now changing and implementing rules that could impact that development and any other development that would be in a similar situation. And so council's rationale was to provide a window, a time certain, for them to complete what they could have done prior to the implementation of the rule without having to go through the development agreement. That's a little different than the normal process because this is a non-conforming use, not a non-conforming structure. And so the MGA treats those differently to some extent. So in coastal protection, although the coastal protection land use bylaw didn't include a grandfathering clause, if you had a valid building permit that you took out before the rules were implemented, you were not subject to the rules because we cannot, at law, make things effective retroactively. So it's always on a go-forward basis. With this non-conforming use, it's different. We don't have a lot of experience with it. And it's a structure that is created under provincial legislation. And under the Condominium Act, the developer has 10 years to put in place a phased development condominium. So we're not going with the 10 years under the legislation. We're going with however many months it is between now and December 2025. And the thought was that that was a reasonable alternative. And it provided time for the developer to put in the necessary infrastructure to support the units that were being created, like the road. One of our primary goals when we started was to try to get the private road standard that is under the subdivision bylaw to apply to cluster developments, which are outside the subdivision bylaw. And so the first draft was focused a lot on that. We then received legal advice that the ability to control the design and construction of private roads is found under the subdivision section of the Municipal Government Act and not the land use bylaw section. And because phased development condominiums are exempt from the subdivision bylaw section of the MGA, we couldn't do it as prescriptively. So the option that was explored and is being presented is that we're looking at the adequacy of things. So we're not being prescriptive and saying you must build to this standard. What we're saying is we've identified those areas where we think there should be discussion between the developer and council, and it's going to have a public component so that council can be satisfied that the adequacy of the road network, the adequacy of the service plan, the adequacy of the environmental study, the adequacy of the water and the hydrological report if it's necessary. Much less prescriptive, but trying to initiate that discussion where no discussion currently exists because they're not required to give us any information. So the thought was that it's a good compromise, and we also believe that it's information the developers likely have prepared anyway, just as due diligence for part of their development. But there is no, as Rita's indicated, there's no requirement to recognize any grandfathering by us. But that's not to say that the developer wouldn't take a position that they are grandfathered and they should be grandfathered and challenge the land use bylaw. So it's kind of when you ask a lawyer for a question, you often get a longer answer. So that's sort of a fulsome review of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how it's different than the coastal protection and the application of a building permit as opposed to a non-conforming use of a corporate entity, which is the condo.
Thank you. What you outlined was the time frame, the legal conditions, and how we operate within the current provincial legislation. And I think those are three important points to make. I know when we had a presentation here earlier this morning, the questions were asked, but it may have appeared that we never had that discussion earlier. And I want to ensure people who are listening to this meeting that we did look at these points and we tried to find a way that was fair to both sides of the equation. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Roigel.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to totally not talk about any of what we've just been talking about. I'm going to Appendix A, and it says in there about the what a cluster development means. And it says, and I just have a question on what do you mean by partially served, and how much is partially served by water and wastewater? And so if a cluster developments are defined by how much service of water or sewer is being used, should it not be and or, rather than just and?
I can comment on that. So for the definition of a cluster development, the reason why we had decided that it should be serviced by water and wastewater is so that there are standards that are applied to rural developments, and there are standards that are applied to more service developments. Things like a hydrogeological study need not apply. So the reason why it specifies that it must be entirely serviced is if you took an example where you had a proposal and you said, okay, I'm going for 40 units on a lot. I'm going to have 20 of them that are going to be unserviced, 20 of them that are going to be serviced. The regulations would still apply to them. And so that would create a situation where they're applied evenly to all cases where they need to be applied.
And I still have, I'm not quite understanding because it says, let me see, it says contained in 2 or more dwellings on a single lot that is partly or entirely unserved by municipal water and sewer. So I'm not sure, like, because you're saying that they would be served, but here it says unserved by municipal water and sewer. And it also says partly, and I'm just wondering how much is partly?
So partly would be, so long as there is one unit that is unserviced, that it would require a development agreement.
Okay, should it be more specific then? And I'm just, I'm just wondering regarding loopholes, right? And whether or not it also includes the and or, because right now you say and, you have municipal water and sewer. So they both have to be, or can it be one or the other? I know it's wording, but I think wording, we have gotten caught under wording before.
Just one moment, please.
Okay.
Outside voices.
Yeah, apologies, yeah, we were just making sure, like, just reviewing that definition one more time to make sure we're on the same page. I guess, just to comment on, when we're suggesting that fully serviced properties should be exempt from this, that's recognizing that areas like Osprey Village or any other areas that have both water and sewer, we've recognized that those are development areas. And so we're recognizing that at the time that we're gonna recognize that, we wanna be identifying if there's major environmental issues at that time. Before we're doing those water and sewer expansions into those areas, we wanna at that time identify, is there a major, environmental issue in this area? And the same thing goes for, is there water and sewer capacity? That's an obvious one, because we're providing those full services at that time. Same thing with the road network. We would typically expect that in these, very strong growth areas, that the roads in these areas are actually public roads. And so they're meeting the public road standards. So all of those requirements that a development would go through in the unserviced areas or partly serviced areas, so if they just have water or just have sewer, there are other things that they may need to be meeting and look at more closely, such as, is there sewer capacity, is there water, and is it in a really environmentally sensitive area? So that's why we wanted to define and separate out those areas like Osprey Village from those other areas. It's not to say you couldn't do a cluster development here or in some other community. It's just to say if you're doing it in a more rural setting, there's a higher standard and you do need to go through the development agreement process.
And just to build on your point, Reed, if the concern is over wording, the definition could read something like, cluster development means 6 or more dwelling units contained in 2 or more dwellings, where at least one lot is not serviced by municipal water and sewer. And that might provide the level of specificity that is desired.
I just wanted to make sure that it's specific, because as I said, we have been caught before under different things in our wording as loopholes. And I don't want that to be happening in the future. That's all. So that's why I brought it up.
Just a final note, all the information has gone to legal, just to have a review of everything to make sure that they're supportive of, and they don't see any issues. So we did get that okay. So we're pretty confident. I think that there aren't any major loopholes with the clauses or the definitions.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Haysom.
So much time has passed, I completely forget what my question was, but it will come back to me.
Further questions?
You just have to give it a second and it will return.
Councillor Haysom.
Thank you so much. So Tom, thank you for some of the detail that you put forward. I guess my question is there a reason why we can't grandfather, for lack of a better term, the current applications that are in the hopper without providing this additional 17-month period for new applications to come in? And the reason I ask is, I know that we don't necessarily have an awareness of what applications might be coming in until they come to us. So for all we know, there could be a whole bunch lined up that are ready. They've already done all the survey work, they've done all the preliminary stuff, and then we're going to get a significant number of applications within that time frame. Is there a reason why we are making that distinction?
Yeah, so as I indicated earlier, under the Condominium Act, a phased development condominium can be developed over a 10-year period. So without any control date in place, we would have no idea what their plans are beyond what we can see at the Registry of Deeds. So the thought was, give a period of time so that we can see movement by the developer, and if they can't get it done in that period, and they still plan on introducing new phases, which they don't have to, like if a 10-phase development doesn't have to do 10 phases, they could stop whenever they want. But the thought was, if we have a date that they have to work towards and they can't meet it, then, rather than waiting 10 years to see what happens, we have the opportunity to initiate the discussion because the development agreement would become mandatory. And at that point, we might not have a lot of influence on what was done up to that date, but we would see and have a better sense of what's occurring into the future, particularly as it relates to, and one of the key elements is the capacity of the road network to accommodate not only the people that are living on it, but emergency vehicles, to make sure that can be serviced. And in the example of Second Peninsula, because there are, I think, 8 phases, the thought was, if they can't get them all done, then we would like an opportunity to have that discussion rather than just waiting for the 10 years to see if they do it or not.
So if I could, that means that because we don't see how many potential phases are coming, this allows us to, or a developer allows them this amount of time to get through however many phases which they may have already applied for.
So, so we can see on the condominium declaration that's registered at the Registry of Deeds, their plan. So they provide what looks very much like a plan of subdivision. We just don't get to see or comment on that plan. But they do, and they are required to provide that to the Register of Condominiums, get it approved, and then it gets registered at the Registry of Deeds. So using the Second Peninsula, and keeping in mind, this land use bylaw is not only intended to apply to Second Peninsula.
Of course.
But that's an easy example because most people are familiar with it. So they had, I believe, 8 phases, and the phasing that's in the declaration would have all phases finished by September 2024. That's under the declaration. But they have 10 years to do it all, and they're not required to create any phases if they don't want to. So when we were discussing it, it wasn't to, in the normal course, if you're non-conforming, you're always non-conforming. The grandfathering is forever. This was treated a little differently because of the desire of council to become involved at some point when it was deemed appropriate. And that grandfathering provision was intended to allow for developers who are interested in moving it forward to move it forward and get the work done. But as Reed has indicated, it's not, council is not required to provide that kind of grandfathering. Council could say, if we've signed the declaration saying the bylaw doesn't apply to you, it will never apply to you, and do it, go about your business under the Condominium Act. So that is an option that's available to council, but it's not the one that council settled on and directed staff to prepare.
Councillor Vino.
Thank you. Tom, a couple times you used the phrase "get it done," meaning in that 17 months. Can you elaborate on what "get it done" means? Do you mean register at the condominium, to apply for the development agreement, building permit?
So, so what I'm referring to is that we have observed that there's a significant amount of work required to even create the condo corporation. And we're involved at the beginning, we're involved at the end of that process for the declaration from our development officer. We're fortunate that the primary lawyer for phase development condominiums in Nova Scotia does interact with our development officer proactively to let us know what's coming. So they created on paper the phase development condominium. They create the plans that are necessary to satisfy the condominium registrar of all things required under that. But they have a long timeline under that act of 10 years to move things forward. It's been very public that we've been working on this cluster development bylaw for well over a year, and that we were prepared for first reading back in February, which was paused for a whole bunch of reasons. But that all well publicized. We've had public engagement, we've had public meetings, there's been contact with the registrar. We've written to the province, so it's not a surprise. But during the first year we're working on that, because we're watching, we didn't see in certain developments much activity, even though we're moving forward with the land use bylaw. So The grandfathering date was also intended to set up a target for developers so they know you don't have an indefinite period of time. You don't have the 10 years under the Condo Act. You have this period of time, and if you can't get all of your work done in that period and you want to develop more in your phased development condominium, then you're going to be subject to this bylaw, and that will include whatever council deems as part of the bylaw, which currently is a development agreement. And as I stated earlier, we've had to step back on what we can require in the development agreement because phased development condominiums are exempt from the subdivision provisions of the MGA. So we wanted to be prescriptive and say, here's a private road standard we want you to build to. We've been told we can't do that. So the next best thing was demonstrate to council that you have an adequate road network, that you can service the lots that are there, that you can allow for emergency vehicles to get in and out, and that you have the permission from Public Works to connect to a public road. So those, and we've done that, I think, in 4 different areas that are outlined in the bylaw. So we still want to be involved. We still want the information. It's not an attempt to stop development. It's an attempt to get the developer to engage with us and to provide us with information, most of which we think they would likely have done anyway, just as part of their due diligence. But the difference is, right now they can do it without, they file that one document with us, we sign off, say nothing, and we might not hear from them again until they actually start building buildings, and then we get building permits. This is to try to get them to engage with the municipality, have those discussions, and there is a public component. So there's public engagement so that members of the public that are interested have an opportunity to have input and look at what's being discussed. And at the end of the day, council would enter into a development agreement, and that would cover all of the things that are in the proposed land use bylaw. So again, a long answer. But this is, it's complicated. We're dealing with a structure that's typically seen in cities or towns that's now migrated into rural Nova Scotia, and it's not supported by sewer or water, right? So septic becomes an issue. Water, the ability to service these lots becomes a real issue. But in our municipality, most of the areas are serviced with wells. It's not uncommon. But it is different than if you're building in Osprey Village and you're connected to central services. So we're trying to change the landscape, not as much as we originally intended, but still we think it's enough to make it worthwhile.
Councillor Stanton.
Thank you. I guess we all know there's a need for housing. So we need to consider the developers, the contractors who are trying to provide that housing, and the lack of personnel when they go for permits and they go for service like excavation or builders or land surveyors or that type of uses that they need. So they need some time to put all that together. And that's why I think that we decided to extend, in fact, I know that was one of my arguments, to extend the time frame to give those developers time to get their process in place. And I think that's really important. I wonder if you could just explain to me, I know bare land condominiums are provincial registration, they're provincial responsibilities, and I think this cluster development come out of the fact that we're getting bare land condominiums and have no control over what's happening. So when we put this in place as a cluster development regulation, can someone still do a bare land condominium with provincial approval? Will one affect the other?
The answer is yes. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear. So under these regulations, yes, you can still create a bare land condominium. There's a development agreement process that would go along with it, assuming that it falls within our definition. But yes, you can absolutely still make a bare land condominium.
I guess my question is, do these cluster developments regulations go along with their bare land condominium, or do they not have any impact on the bare land condominium at all?
Yes, they absolutely could and would, and in other jurisdictions in the province that have this type of policy in place do. And I say that in the terms of, you know, if you get an application or for a development agreement and they have a certain number of lots, and they do the water testing that's required as part of that process and find out there's not actually enough water for that many lots. So they may need to revise their plans and come forward with fewer units in that condominium development. So at the end of the day, it could look differently. Same thing with maybe how the roads are constructed or if there's other issues with the site. So that can have an impact on how the property might look and how the units are laid out. So at the end of the day, it might look a bit different because of this process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any further discussion? I believe I have everyone. You were finished your presentation? No, I didn't think so. Continue, please.
It's only 6 slides, so. The last bullet point here is to review every 5 years. This is quite standard for planning projects that we've had recently, and it's just in accordance with the most up-to-date development practices. We've touched on this before, but just to be explicit, this is a summary of the development agreement process. So these live in the Municipal Government Act under the implementation section. And there's a wide variety of things that you can require as part of a development agreement, which is enabled by the Municipal Government Act. All of the ones that we've included in this plan specifically relate to things that you may wish to require as a council for a cluster development. At a high level, it says here, council will consider individual proposals based on the adequacy of street networks, site access, emergency access, of services such as water and sewer, the availability of a safe water supply, and the suitability of the site in relation to its environmental impact.
Councillor Haysom.
Thank you. During our public input, one thing that we heard over and over was to consider proposals based on comparative density to the communities in which they were going to be located, and I don't see that reflected here. And I think that was an important piece of feedback, and it was sort of site-specific. I know that we had some discussion about what appropriate density is, and that's very hard to say, but to look at comparable density in a jurisdiction and see if it was comparable or if it was very out of character with the rest of the community.
I do recall actually a fairly good discussion, particularly at the Planning Advisory Committee, about that particular comment, and that is one way of looking at development. It's not really considered a best practice from a planning perspective when it comes to looking at those larger issues. The things like water, transportation, emergency services, environmental impact, those can in our view, those should ultimately be the determining piece of density. So I think water is one of the most obvious ones, and we see that in our discussions with other colleagues around the province. That is the most influential piece in determining density, is the water supply. So if there's not enough water, the density typically needs to go lower so that there's enough basically well water there that's not going to drain or have an impact on neighboring wells. Looking at the density of neighboring areas, just in the sense of the character or just the overall feel of the community, I think that can not be the best way of measuring a site in terms of how adequate that site is, only in the sense that if the density around it is too much, and then just to say, well, there's lots of density everywhere, it's appropriate to do more density here when there's not enough water, that's not really the best way of looking at it. So I think that we want to look to those more kind of scientific aspects to help us look at the density. The density certainly is, I think, one of the things that will be influenced, but I don't think we want to only look at that in making a determination of whether something's appropriate or not.
Okay. Continue.
great news. So we're on to the motion. So that's it from me. As was mentioned, this isn't set in stone. So if council wishes to make changes to that motion, that's something that you may do. But yeah, open to any more questions.
I'm not seeing any questions. So I guess, can you explain, if first reading is given today, what that timeline looks like? And if the first reading is today, this is when the clock starts ticking. But can the clock have a longer time between now and September 10th? And the reason I say that is because it would mean that there would be public consultation during the month of August with that September 10th date. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, that's correct, yep.
So it still would mean that nothing could happen. The clock is ticking for the grandfathering and,
That's correct.
okay. So, and if it was the second, or a different date in September or October, it could still work to keep everything on par. I'm just
Yes.
looking at staff, and I will be honest with our public that council typically does not sit in the month of August. And that would mean that staff would be back working when they were not maybe scheduled to, for vacations or whatever. And I just want to be cognizant of that, and I want council to be aware of that as well. So I guess it is the wish of council, which way you choose to go, but either way, if today is first reading, it has the same impact as setting a later council date for the second reading, correct?
Yes, sorry, I'm looking at you because just for public engagement purposes, August is a terrible time to try and get
Absolutely, it's a
residents'
terrible
attention.
time to get people's
So
input as well.
It would be challenging to get lots of turnout. And just think about it from your own perspective. Would you rather go to the beach for an evening or go to a very warm hall and discuss municipal land use planning? So it would be very reasonable if you wanted to provide more period
Of time, but it
than-
would still
than
do
normal
the same thing as having first reading today. I just want people to be clear on that piece, so.
Just for clarification, I think what we would recommend would be, in terms of that public engagement, would be one public information session. That would be similar to how we structured the coastal ones, just to provide people an overview. But I think we would we would recommend that there be one of those public information sessions, and then one opportunity for second reading, at which time you could, the public hearing and second reading at one time. So there would be kind of two dates we would be thinking about going forward.
Does the second date, if we move first reading, does the second date have to be part of the motion?
I don't believe it does, no.
Well, I don't know if we know that date, that's why I'm saying it. What is your wish?
That date could be set later. We would like some direction from council. Is this something you intend to do before the municipal election, for example? Recognizing you don't want to do it the early part of September because that would have forced all of your public engagement to happen in August.
But either way, impact is today for first reading.
Yep.
I just want people, if you're having first reading today, that is the impact. What is your wish? I've got silence at the table. I'm just reading the motion that council give notice of its intention to amendments. So it would change the September 10th part only of this. And it could say at a future date. For the simple reason of that public consultation in August and for council and staff. would be the reason. And I think that is fair reason. Councillor Hubley.
So we can move ahead today with what the recommendation from staff and just put in there at a future date,
Yes.
correct?
But the clock is ticking as of today.
That's right. That's my vote. That's the way I want to go.
So I would ask Councillor Hubley if she would be prepared to move the first motion.
Yes, thank you. To our honor, Mayor Bolivar Getson and members of council, I move that council give notice of its intention to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to include new sections containing the regulations related to cluster development found in Appendix A and B and to conduct first reading. And I so move.
So moved by Councillor Hubley. Is there a seconder? To have second read, Councillor Moore. And I do see that, I don't see, but Deputy Mayor Oikel.
I just had a question. Is there not a specific number of days between first and second reading?
150 days.
That-
150 days.
Correct.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, I thought it was less than that. Wonderful. That was all I was asking.
There's a minimum and a maximum. Yes.
So
Tom.
just want to point out that the council members that attend the public hearing are the only ones that can vote on second reading. So you would not want to set up a situation where the public hearing and second reading occur with the election in between, right? Because any new council member that doesn't attend the public hearing as a council member could not vote on second reading. So if you have the public hearing and there is substantial changes come out of that, then you're back to first reading. But if there isn't, you move forward to second reading. And if that second reading is the same day as the public hearing, then there isn't an issue. But if you're separating those dates, like we did with coastal development, you've got to be cautious about the election.
So there's a motion on the floor.
There is a motion on the floor, I know that. Councillor Vino.
Speaking to the motion, I won't be voting in favor for it as these appendix don't address the main thing I've heard from my residents regarding grandfathering clauses and non-conforming uses, and under 5.3.1, the December 25th, or December 2025 date.
Councillor Haysom.
I find myself in the same position as Councillor Vino, where I can't vote in favor of this because I do have an issue with the long time frame for additional applications.
So I just want to question that statement. So additional applications couldn't come in after first reading, correct?
Yeah, so my understanding is that if you pass first reading, then it is presumed that this bylaw is in place. And if we got a new application for a phased development condominium,
It would fall
and the
under the
development
new-
officer was asked to execute it, we would be indicating in that response, there is a land use bylaw in place that the phased development condominium must meet. So it's the difference between if they're already in the queue and we've signed saying there is no a land use bylaw, like the case in Second Peninsula, that can continue and gets the benefit of the grandfathering. If it comes in tomorrow, and council did first reading today, my understanding is it does not get the provision of the grandfathering because it is after, it's been introduced after first reading. But I'd ask Reed to confirm that, but that's my understanding of how it's currently
Got a
written.
funny look.
And I know we
We
had.
do have our development officer
Yes,
here as
and I know,
well.
and we had a clarification about that. The way that it's written, as far as I'm concerned, is all that matters is whether it's registered with the condominium registry by the end of December 2025. And if it is registered by that time, then it's considered as a non-conforming use and therefore grandfathered. It doesn't talk about whether it their application was already, or they're already underway or not. It only talks about whether they've been registered. So
Okay,
that's the way
so-
that the clause is written.
So, yeah, so then I would raise a legal issue, how a development officer could execute a declaration when a first reading has been passed
Yeah.
that provides for the cluster development. So that's probably something that should be explored, at least between now and second reading. Because there's two different interpretations. One would suggest future applications cannot be grandfathered because they are subject to a bylaw that is in effect. And the way that my understanding of the non-conforming use structure is that the use must exist prior to the introduction of the bylaw. You can't have a non-conforming use that's introduced after a bylaw, because the bylaw would suggest non-conforming uses after the fact are not valid, which is, I think, is what the MGA provides. So there is a.
So I guess my question would be, so if this motion fails right now, as it reads, with moving ahead with first reading, what does that mean for the whole? Because another motion being introduced would have to be substantially different. And is a grandfathering clause substantially different?
So it would be preferable for you to address that issue before attempting to defeat this motion. Or approve the motion, I suppose.
Councillor Haysom.
Thank you. What I'm looking for is clarification. So if someone has already as I understood it, if someone has
Yes.
already registered with the of course they're grandfathered in. The issue with this 17-month period is that new registrations can take place regardless of the fact that new registrations can take place and not be subject to a development agreement. But
Well,
I'm
our
hearing two
understanding is
different
Our
things.
understanding is that they couldn't, so we do need clarification on that.
I can't vote on this until I
No.
have clarification on
I
that
think we're
piece.
going to take a 15-minute break.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome back to our special council meeting. I'm going to turn it over to our staff, our CAO, Tom McEwen, to try to bring some clarification to the questions.
Okay, so the good news is that we do have consensus amongst staff on the interpretation of this land use bylaw. So section 4.4 of the proposed bylaw deals with non-conforming uses. And 4.4.1 says uses of land that existed on the date of adoption of this bylaw and that do not conform to the requirements of this bylaw are considered non-conforming under section 238 of the MGA. So that is a general rule on the adoption of non-conforming uses. The use in question that we're talking about is a phased development condominium. So that phased development condominium as an entity, which is evidence of use, must exist prior to first reading to get the benefit of the grandfathering clause. So there can be no race to the registry if today is first reading, because tomorrow is too late. So we see in section 4.6 the non-conforming bare land condominiums with the December date. So section 4.6 is subject to 4.4.1, right? You have to read them together. It's a rule of statutory interpretation. You read the whole statute as a unit as opposed to individual sections if you're trying to get the meaning. So another way of putting it would be 4.6 would be subject to 4.4.1 for cluster developments. So the bylaw as written is intended for 4.4.1 to be the overriding non-conforming use structure. 4.6 is specific for non-conforming bare land condominiums. You can contrast this with a cluster development, which is not a bare land condominium, gets no grandfathering. So that, as it's written, that is the interpretation. So there is no risk of the race to the registry. If it exists today, it's grandfathered. If it exists tomorrow, it is not. And then 4.6 says what that non-conforming use and grandfathering really means, and that is if you exist today, if you can get all of your units developed prior to December 2025, you won't have to do a development agreement. But if you can't, then you're going to have to do a development agreement for some of the later phases of the project that are introduced after December 2025, or whatever date is chosen by council.
And can you explain what registered means?
Right.
Because we had two different interpretations of what registered
Yep.
meant, whether
So-
or not that was when somebody made the inquiry and was told.
Yeah, so it's the condo corp must be created and registered at the registry of deeds as a condo corp holding land. So in the case of Second Peninsula, because that's the easiest example, it's the one most people are familiar with, the condo corp was created and held a small piece of land. But the phased development of that condominium will encompass all of the remaining land on that lot. And as each unit or each phase is developed, it's consolidated with the first. So when phase 2 is done, it's consolidated with phase 1 grows. When phase 3 is created, and it's consolidated with phase 1 and it grows bigger. So that's the clarification for the interpretation of section 4.4, non-conforming use, and in particular, non-conforming bare land condominiums.
So again, on Second Peninsula, it would not affect the development, and that's what was stated
Right.
earlier as
So-
well.
So Second Peninsula and any phased development condominium that's existing today would have till December 2025 to create as many units as it intends to create. Anything past that date would not be grandfathered and would be subject to development agreement. So I apologize for the difference in interpretations. There were two different ones. We could certainly appreciate if staff amongst ourselves have two different interpretations. It's likely members of the public are either uncertain or have an interpretation that may or may not be correct. But for the record, what I've indicated is the interpretation of the bylaw as written.
So we have a motion on the floor, and could you bring that motion back up, please.
Could I ask a question?
Councillor Moore.
If this passes, and as of today, it's the drop dead date, somebody that's wanting to do something but are not registered yet, what kind of hoops do they have to jump through to get a development agreement?
Public consultation.
Sure. So the policies in the municipal planning strategy speak to, the issues that they'd have to look at. The development agreement process is flexible, so there may be requirement for some studies to be completed as part of that. So like a hydrogeological study is a water quality and quantity study. That could be a requirement, looking at their roads and that those are correct, designed correctly. And then there's a formal kind of public meeting and opportunity for people to provide input as well. So there's a few different steps, but there is that kind of criteria that's in the municipal planning strategy policies. And then there's the formal kind of public engagement part as well.
And right now, this is where I'm confused, if I might.
Supplementary, go ahead.
Right now, there was no,
Public.
was there a public consultation in Second Peninsula?
No.
No, okay. All right. Okay.
And
thank
we're
you.
saying Second Peninsula, but we do have
Yeah.
many more
Yeah,
Bearland condominiums in our municipality. So just for the public, when we're stating one only, they do exist in other areas of our municipality as well. I'm not sure how many we have, but we do have several. And have had several for quite a few years. So the motion, that council give notice of its intention to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to include new sections containing the regulations related to cluster development found in Appendix A and B, and to conduct first reading, is the motion that's on the floor. Now, can you explain what this will mean if this date is pushed forward past an election date? If first reading was to happen today,
Okay. So if, for example, first reading were to happen today, and if the second motion were to read a date in November 2024, after the new council is sworn in, the public hearing would take place. Municipal council members that are at the public hearing could vote at second reading, and second reading can take place on the same day as the public hearing or on another day. But it would potentially be a different council passing second reading than passed first. So the only caution that we have to make sure that we manage is that the public hearing and second reading can't involve this council and public hearing and a new council and second reading.
So the public hearing has to be after the election date in order for that to happen.
Yeah, or
Or
second reading
before.
has to be before the election.
Yeah.
You just have to manage that.
Yeah. So does everyone understand the motion as it currently sits? Councillor Haysom.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that clarification. So now I would like some clarification about what that deadline of December 31st, 2025 refers to.
Okay.
If you could clarify.
So the grandfathering clause allows phase development condominiums to continue to create units without the necessity of entering into a development agreement. So it would continue as it is right now, as if there was no land use bylaw in place.
that's only if they're registered, right?
That's for non-conforming uses. So they currently exist now.
Yeah.
They're not fully developed, but they are created. And if they're created, they have until December 2025 to bring in their phases and create their units. And the units are created at the Registry of Deeds. They're only created on paper.
And are we aware of those when they're registered? Are we
Yeah,
made
that's-
known?
I don't know if we're made known, but it's all viewable on the Registry of Deeds, including the date of registration.
So there's not a truckload of these, is what we're saying, that we're aware of.
No. But there are more than we thought when we started this process. Like it is being used as a development structure within the municipality.
Does everyone understand the motion? Question has been called for. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor Oikel?
Yes.
Opposed is Councillor Vino and Councillor Staton. Motion is carried. There is a second motion that municipal council set a date and time for a public hearing for the amended municipal planning strategy and municipal-wide land use bylaw regulations on, do we have a date, or are we just saying at a future date? After, or are we setting a November, a second week in November council meeting? So that would be the 26th of November?
Yeah, okay. May I?
Councillor Moore?
I want to see this through. I don't know what's going to happen in October. I pray at night, but anyway, I don't know, and I want to see this through. I've sat here and made decisions over the years, and I want to see this through.
So I'm looking for a motion, and I will ask Councillor Bell if he would be prepared to move a motion. No, we don't.
For the September 10th date, I would like to, or it would be my intention, on a date set by council, so that this council can hopefully make the decision before the election. Is that acceptable to you?
The motion, I'm asking you to make a motion.
Okay. Well, I'm just informing you, ma'am, that it might not be exactly as read. To Her Honor, Mayor Bolivar Getson and members of council, I move that municipal council set a date and time for a public hearing for the amended municipal planning strategy and municipal-wide land use bylaw regulations on a future date in council chambers, and further, that municipal council instructs staff in the meantime to schedule a public information meeting to inform residents about the implications of the new regulations prior to the public hearing. I so move.
Moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Wynot, and I have Deputy Mayor Oikel.
In what Councillor Bell just said, he did not state that the present sitting council would be able to be part of that.
No, he said a future date is what the motion
Yes,
reads.
that's right, he said a future date, but yet he did comment that he would like it to be for this present sitting council. So I'm just wondering if that should be in there.
Councillor Vino.
With not saying a specific date, how does that apply to the public information meeting portion? And I bring this up because I'm not in favor of public consultation during the month of August. And I'm going to look towards our communications officer who maybe could provide some feedback on trying to do consultation in summer months when people might be traveling or have vacation and aren't thinking about attending a public meeting, where we could get some valuable input, and also on staff and the rest of us where we normally don't sit in
Sarah.
August.
My recommendation would definitely be that starting the first week of September. It is challenging. There are, people don't want to go to engagement in December because you're getting ready for Christmas. September's back to school. July, August is summer. January is cold, too dark to drive. Everyone will have a reason of why they don't want to go if we do enough advertising. If we do maybe a virtual session as well, we've had a lot of success with that where they can watch it afterwards. We generally can overcome problems with timing. People will always have a good reason to give you why they didn't come if they weren't passionate about that topic.
Councillor Haysom.
Thank you. Did you say that it is possible to have both the information session and the public hearing on the same day? No, okay,
No.
sorry, I misunderstood.
Yes, the public hearing and second reading could be on the same day. Yep.
So, if I may, Your Worship,
Go ahead.
The-
Deputy CAO Alex Demerick.
the way that the motion has been said on the floor, it would still permit you to hold a public information session in September, and then we could schedule a public hearing to happen on the same day as second reading. If council wishes, that can happen in September and October before the municipal election.
Any further discussion on the motion? Question has been called for. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor Oikel?
Yes.
Opposed? Opposed is Councillor Staton. Motion is carried. So the next item on the agenda is Councillors' Matters and Councillor Haysom.
Thank you very much. Just give me a moment here. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time. As many of you probably know, there was a really severe accident at Rissers Beach over the weekend. It involved 3 vehicles, some of which had children in the car. A lot of emergency vehicles were there, 3 ambulances. Life Flight eventually came in. Around this council table in the past, we have talked about some issues around pedestrian safety at this particular location where it's a busy public space, provincial park. It's on a straight stretch of highway that has a 70-kilometer-an-hour speed limit and a passing zone. And there is, in the summer, obviously a lot more traffic. We've got people who come to our area from all over the province, frankly, to visit Rissers Beach and the surrounding area. So we had in the past put forward a motion to write to Department of Public Works and request a crosswalk in that area. That was turned down by Department of Public Works, and I do understand why. It's difficult to put a crosswalk in a location where traffic is moving at 70 kilometers an hour. That makes sense to me. However, I think that we are starting to face the facts that our communities are changing. They're visited a lot more heavily. They are more touristed. We have people who are driving distracted, That's just a fact of life. And there needs to be something in this location, and I am sure many, many others in our municipality, where we are recognizing the experience of people who live there year-round and see the near misses over and over and over. And that's the reason why these requests come to council. So I'm very pleased to say that at this time, at least, it sounds that like everyone survived that accident. And it wasn't a fatality, but it could have been. And there is definitely an opportunity for us to do something to promote public safety. And what I would like to suggest is that we make a motion to write to Department of Public Works requesting a flashing amber light at this location. It's something that allows drivers to just pay a little bit of extra attention. If they're pulling out on a passing lane and you've got people coming in and out of the provincial park there. I know that at the moment, they have just put a speed radar sign there, which is greatly appreciated. Unfortunately, the location makes it really difficult to see the visibility of people entering and exiting that park. So I do appreciate the effort there. I know that we can do a little bit better in order to focus on the safety of our residents. So I would like to move that our council write a letter to Department of Public Works and copy it to all of the relevant MLAs in our area, requesting that they look at putting a flashing amber light in at this location so that we can avoid any future accidents like this.
Before you finish that motion, it may want to include that we do have a request to lower the speed limit again in that area, because I'm not sure they'll put the amber light in a 70 as well.
That
That a traffic study be
absolutely.
carried out in that area. If you would
Absolutely.
include that
So I
way
would like
it
to include in that motion that a traffic study be carried out in that area and perhaps look at lowering the speed
Yes.
limit or perhaps look at removing the passing lane.
Yes.
There's a
there are other
variety of
options there,
things
but a
that could
traffic
happen.
study would need to happen. So.
Absolutely. So that could be considered part of the motion.
Yeah. So moved by Councillor Haysom, seconded by Councillor Bell. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Deputy Mayor Oikel?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. That, I believe, I have, I skipped one. 6.2.1, Engineering and Public Works, Pine Grove Outdoor Play Area, Passive Use Assessment. And we have our Director of Engineering and our Economic Development Officer coming forward.
Mayor and Council, last year the Volunteer Steering Committee gave control of the Pine Grove Park back to the municipality. And at the time, MODL's insurer deemed many of the features to be unsafe, and we had them removed at his request. Some of the infrastructure still remains on the site, and Council has directed staff to inspect the existing site conditions to assess deficiencies and safety issues that need to be addressed prior to opening this space for public use. Staff recently conducted further inspections to assess if any additional work is required. A significant list of deficiencies was identified, both to address safety concerns as well as items to meet a level that one would expect of a municipal park standard. Knowing Council's desire to have the park open for some level of public use, we broke out the items into two different categories, one of more of a safety nature, and then others are more of deficiencies of more of a park standard nature. And you'll see the deficiency list broken out in the Council report. In addition to the safety, these deficiency lists, we've also presented some other issues just for Council's future consideration should the Council wish to redevelop the park at a future time. So a safe reopening of Pine Grove Park for public use as it now exists would require the completion of the safety-related deficiencies. The approximate cost to address these safety issues is roughly $16,000. Timing-wise, to reopen the park, there's a variety of different people that will be required to address all the little bits and pieces. There's a little bit of metal works, there's civil works, and so on. So I have to coordinate a number of different kind of trades to go in, which requires some time and effort. We have not explored the availability of these people to perform this work, so it'll be difficult to commit to an opening time right now. And we do have a number of other projects on the go at this time, and it's not in our work plan. But depending on Council's direction, we will move to meet Council's desired outcome to the best that we can. The cost to complete the other deficiencies, that's the second group, is roughly $38,000. Note that looking at the two deficiency lists, there's some synergies to doing both at the same time with the safety deficiencies along with some of those other ones. You have to mobilize equipment and so on, so there's some synergies to doing both at the same time. We're recommending funds to address that second group of deficiencies listed to be included in a future capital budgeting process. And for the other issues of future consideration, should be incorporated in any park redevelopment plan and prioritized with other MODL Recreate Parks initiatives. So that's sort of a group of findings that what we have. So I guess we're looking for direction of where to go from here. We were asked to come back with a list of what it would take to get the park opened safely.
So I'm just looking at some of the safety-related deficiency and grade the parking area and driveway and so on. I guess we were asked to look at this for dog walking and passive recreation and so on. I'm not sure that we would, I'm just looking at closing or not opening something for the grading of a driveway or a parking lot, and that seems a bit on the other end for me. I'm sorry, because we drive over roads every day that we question whether or not we should be driving on them, and this is parking.
Yeah, the grading, and we can go in, and Jamie and I, we had a lot of debate of which lists these should go on, and it goes back and forth. That one, I think, was the last one to get moved up. If you get into the nuts and bolts of them, it's easier to kind of put one in one bucket or the other.
I guess there's definitely, when I see rebar or things that are there, those are definite safety concerns, but I question a couple. I will turn it over to Councillor Stanton.
Yeah, because the public is asking for this park to be open, could you put on the screen or review what the rules and regulations are? I can read them on my report, but the general public, we're just referring generally to what you saw and what needs to be done. So if you could put it on the screen, or review it, tell us what the items are, that would be appreciated.
Sure, I can go down through the list if you wish. On the safety-related deficiencies, fix the washouts created by storm runoff in the back of the concrete ice rink pad to ensure a smooth transition. It's a drop down, which is identifies a tripping hazard. Cut rebar flush with the concrete pad that were used for the rink to prevent injury. Install, there's a new secure drain grate on the rink pad to eliminate the trip hazard. It's lifted up. Remove wire from around the perimeter of the rink pad, small wires protruding and rusted, presenting a hazard. Remove the conduit, electrical conduit running from the pump hose to the vault toilet. This electrical work does not meet code and is also a trip hazard. Fill the sinkholes between the old swing set pad and the rink pad that present a trip hazard. Clean the climbing equipment that is covered with bird excrement. Remove the soccer nets that aren't fastened down. Bolt down the drain.
Why would you remove the soccer nets?
They're not fastened. They're not anchored down. So there's been cases our recreation folks have told us that where they've actually kids playing on them, they can actually topple over and cause serious injury if they're not anchored down. Bolt down the drain grate on the splash pad properly or replace with a cover that can be fixed. This is potentially a tripping hazard. Change the 4 PVC pipe plugs which protrude from the concrete surface of the splash pad with socket head plugs to prevent tripping. Install a more secure locking device to the well top as per MODL's insurance provider. Remove the ramp to the vault washroom. The existing ramp is rotten and a safety hazard. Install a barrier of some sort, a guardrail to prevent users from falling into the ditch as per MODL's insurance provider. And the last one was about grading the parking lot. So that was the list, and there's an equally long list of other deficiencies that we've tried to identify as lower priority to be addressed in future years.
I guess I'm just going back to the original ask here, and the original ask was for passive recreation. And I'm looking at irrelevant signs and so on. I guess what is the cost associated again with making this into a passive park in the immediate time frame or in?
We've come up with an estimate of around $16,000 to address.
$16,000.
Yeah, to address the safety issues.
And that is all the ones on that list.
Yes, yeah.
Councillor Staton.
I totally agree with addressing the safety issues. Some of this stuff is ridiculous. The soccer nets, when have you ever gone on a soccer net field that wasn't regulation that the nets were secured? Those nets get moved by the level of whoever's playing with them, whether it's young kids or older kids, they'll move them closer or farther away. It's been like that for forever. No one's ever gotten hurt. As far as the driveway, there should be enough gravel on the site to gravel that driveway, and what is it, 500-600 yards to get it graded? I mean, some of this stuff is so far out of reach or ridiculous. I can see anything that's safety related. I can understand that. But some of the other stuff is not really relevant to opening that park for people to walk around and maybe take their dog in or play a little ball hockey on the concrete pad or something along that line. So I guess I would be glad to make a motion to get the basics done, the security stuff done, the safety stuff done, and have that park open for passive recreation. I'm not asking that you get that splash pad up and running this year. I know there's work to be done there, but as far as letting people in there to walk, they're in there anyway. So we might as well try to make it a little safe for them.
And we agree, people are entering the park anyway, even though it's closed, so these are safety issues.
Well, anything that's identified as a safety issue, I just question the grading of a road as a safety issue. But the,
There is a significant washout down the center of the parking lot, is why we've wanted to grade it.
So-
Which you could trip in.
so I guess what is council's wish as far as any safety-related deficiencies when they come to our attention are supposed to be fixed anyway? Councillor Hubley.
Do we have liability in the parking lot if someone does twist their ankle in one of these potholes or something like that? I know, yeah, there has to be some liability. I know we drive on worse roads, but I'm thinking that we are liable.
Yeah, I think Elaine, our Director of Finance, or Trudy, yeah.
Anyone can sue anyone. That's how we keep our lawyers employed, guys.
I guess that's what I was going to say. We do have insurance through the municipality. It'd be the blanket policy that
Yeah.
would be applied to all parks, and where Pine Grove falls under the municipality's ownership, that insurance policy would kick in.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Royko.
So if the ramp is removed from the vault washroom, should it not be replaced? Is the vault washroom able to be used? And if so, the ramp should be replaced rather than just taking it away, because if someone were to come there that has accessibility issues, they may need a ramp to get into the vault washroom.
To answer that, the vault washroom will be closed.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Hubley.
Do we know what the cost is of having this done? And
16, he said.
16, I'm sorry, I missed that. And do we have that in the budget?
No.
Right,
Not currently.
right.
So we do have money in our parks budget. It's $16,000. I'm sure that if it's the wish of council that we can probably have that done, but I'll leave that up to staff.
Yeah, we have some parks maintenance budget, which can accommodate some of that. We also have some surplus from some projects this year, which we can likely reallocate, which would take a further motion, but we can certainly get that sorted out and bring it back to council. I would like to just add, the report that you're seeing here, engineering has been given direction to bring the standard of our public spaces up. Council went through a review and you identified a strategic priority to recreate parks. And so what you see here is their assessment, not just to make it so that we reduce our liability, but to try and bring the park closer to what that standard is, what the vision that council has set. So
you may have disagreement about which particular items might be a pure safety item versus what is something that would be needed to bring it up to that standard that you asked for. But the engineering department is doing their best to bring forward information so that we aren't adding parks to our complement which don't meet the standard that council have asked our staff to meet.
And just to be clear, this one here is currently, we're in the process of putting in a management agreement with another organization.
Yep,
Correct?
that's motion from
Yes.
council on the books to enter into that when the community group is ready.
Councillor Bell.
So here we are being presented with an opportunity to reopen an existing park that needs some work done to it. Incidentally, the work is like 1/5 of the cost of what we took an unbudgeted item to put a gym set in at the ball fields that were not part of our budget. So I certainly will be supporting this. And and even though the list may have things that we consider not necessary, I'm satisfied the engineering went and brought back a list of everything. And if we can make this happen for 16,000, then why are we delaying and having a discussion? Let's make it happen.
So Councillor Staton, would you be prepared to make a motion?
I'd also like to see us, once it's open, maybe look at the community garden prospect next year and see if that's a
That's
possibility.
outside of what
Outside of what we're doing
that's
now.
outside of this motion.
I realize that. Okay, I will move to honor Mayor Bolivar Getz and members of council. I move that we proceed with the safety aspect of opening the Pine Grove Park for the use of the general public. Will that
So
work?
the safety-related deficiencies identified in the report?
That's right.
So moved by Councillor Staton, seconded by Councillor Bell. Any discussion? Councillor Staton.
Just, it would be nice if we could get this done, you know, before winter comes, or so that the park can be used a little bit this year.
I think that they understand that, correct?
We'll go as fast as we can.
Any further discussion? Question called for. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Oikel? Deputy Mayor Oikel?
I'm for.
In favor? Motion is carried unanimously. That concludes our regular agenda. We need a few minutes and we will be going in camera. So we will make the motion to go in camera. Moved by Councillor Wynot, seconded by Councillor Haysom. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously.